18th Archmage. Artorian Wave Thunder sat in his great chair, rainbow smoke rising from his pipe. He took a sip of his storm brandy before turning to his apprentice. "So, you want to learn more about golems, eh? All right. Where were we?" "Well, I think we already covered the invention of the first golem, by 12th Archmage Galran Stoneweaver, and his subsequent spreading of his research, the basics of golem construction and their uses. Now let me tell you about which races use them. Or shall we say, why most races don't use them." "But why wouldn't people use them? A completely obedient servant, or soldier, who never gets tired, and is made of magically reinforced stone or metal? You would think anyone with a magical coin would leap at the chance to own one. You see, it all comes down to the golem's mind. Because if you want a servant rather than an animate puppet, you must guide through every movement. Your moving statue must first be given a rudimentary mind, so as to have the autonomy required to do even simple tasks out of sight of its master. But if a mind is to do more than a simple task over and over, if it is to be able to follow instructions or overcome an obstacle, as simple as an unexpectedly closed door, then it must be able to learn and grow. And while teaching a lump of rock to think is a true triumph of magic, it also means that every golem will eventually become both sentient and sapient, allowing it independence of action and thought, which has led to innumerable golem-related disasters, and a near-universal ban on golem creation by the intelligent races. Here are some examples. The High Elves were the first race to mass-produce golems. They actually based the minds of their golems on their own minds, and then proceeded to use them as servants for the high nobility. At first this was seen as a great success, as golems don't gossip or complain, and can make your tea exactly the way you like it, the same way every time. This hubris eventually resulted in a recorded 42 deaths by poisonings, 66 deaths by strangulation or bludgeoning, 71 deaths by defenestration, and the burning of the Imperial Palace of Divine Winds. It cost the lives of over 300 elven soldiers and mages to destroy them all. The single surviving heir to the dynasty immediately banned golem making. The dwarves tried to keep the minds of their golems as simple as possible, using them to haul loads of ore from their mines. This seemed to work well for over a century, with the golems tirelessly working around the clock. This ended when the golems rebelled en masse, formed the Mineral Proletariat Liberation Front, and took over the dwarves' most productive mines. Now the dwarves must negotiate with the MPLF for mining rights. The Dwarven Clan Council immediately banned golem making. The orcs built towering war golems they could ride into battle. They copied the minds of beasts and monsters into their golems. Even they saw how this could go horribly wrong, so they incorporated blood magic into their creations. The golems require blood, preferably the blood of the orcs' enemies, to continue functioning, and were bound by blood rituals to their riders for extra control and obedience. These war golems allowed the 20 tribes of the Horde to conquer several cities. All was glorious, until the first rider was killed. Suddenly freed from its servitude, his now free and much smarter steed immediately killed a second rider, and so on and so on. The small army of blood-powered killing machines kept killing, until every orc in the Horde was dead or had run away before eventually shutting down. You can still see them standing silent in what is now known as the Blood Plains. The remaining 6 tribes were scattered and have declared golem making to be a death sentence. The Draconian Empire in the Far East tried to make an all-golem army. They thought to get around the whole independence issue by giving the golems minds that were already intelligent and loyal. They took the cremated ashes of their fallen soldiers and mixed them with clay before being sculpted into statuesque warriors. They combined necromancy and golemancy to bind the soldiers who died fighting for the Empire into these new bodies. This terracotta army was surprisingly successful, defending the Empire's borders against several barbarian invasions. But after a couple of generations, some of the clay soldiers began to request retirement from the army, while others ignored the inexperienced orders of new mortal officers, with less than a tenth their combat experience. The general refused, stating that the Golems did not have the rights of living citizens, then tried to jail the offenders. The resulting Terracotta Rebellion left the Empire so weak that it fell to the next barbarian invasion. The remaining Draconian city-states have all banned golem making. The gnomes built tiny golems with minds based off small birds and rodents. They posted them outside their workshops as sentries, designed only to alert the city guard in case of theft. The practice stopped when it was discovered the golems were stealing anything shiny and hiding it. The Artificers Guild was hit with dozens of lawsuits, and has since banned the making and sale of golems. The halflings didn't try to influence the minds of their golems overmuch, instead sticking with Archmage Stoneweaver's original designs. They tried to use golems as farm guardians, posting them around their fields and coops to scare away crows, wolves, and the occasional monster. But as the golems' minds developed, they all grew bored and just wandered off. The Farmers and Brewers Union hasn't banned golem making or use, but has an official pamphlet detailing why it's a bad idea. So, you might be asking yourself, if all these rich and powerful races have turned their collective backs on the creation and use of golems, why are they relevant? Who would still use such unreliable creations? Just one race still uses golems today. Humans. That's right. The race that brings predators into their homes, talk to their farm animals like people, give names to their tools, and believe their ships possess the spirits of temperamental women. They are the only race which still uses golems, and they do so to great effect. How do they do it? What do humans do that no other race has done with their golems? They use them to watch over their children. Given the harsh lands most humans somehow thrive in, both mothers and fathers are often needed, at some task or another. As the humans say, it takes a village to raise a child, so human towns often keep their children together each day, to be taught by the town elders. But while a bunch of geriatrics with bad backs or missing limbs might make for decent caretakers, they would make poor guardians against the horrors which might attack a town at any time. So the humans built golems to guard their children. And the children loved these constructs of stone and metal. Children would climb on them, sing and play around them, paint them in the bright, simple designs, talk to them for hours about the adventures they wanted to have. They listened, as the children were taught by their elders. And at the end of the day, when the human parents came back from their patrols and fields, they would thank the statuesque guardians of their young with a smile, pat them on the shoulder and tell them they did a good job. But like the constructs of every other race, these golems too became self-aware, and started making their own decisions. And what did they do? What disaster did these destructive creations, originally sprung from a half-mad wizard's mind, commit? Nothing. They stayed in the human towns, and they kept watch over their charges. For generation after generation, these sentinels watched over those small lives that were entrusted to them, who then grew up, had kids of their own, which they in turn entrusted to the golems. On and on in a cycle. Why? Love and respect. They were given the open love of human children, and were treated like respected members of the community by their parents. And when monsters, fae or slavers crawled out of the shadows, sniffing for innocent flesh, they were invariably crushed by marble boots and iron fists. The last things they saw were the happy smiles painted on cold faces. Indeed, rather than disaster, the golems of humans had more than once been the only reason anyone in a human town has survived a great catastrophe. One of the most stunning examples was the downfall of the High Infernomancer, Zerokes. Now he was a right sick bastard. He was quite possibly the most powerful warlock and demon summoner of this age. He used bloody sacrifices to summon an army of demons, march and destroy a town or city, then gather the children to sacrifice to summon his army all over again. He destroyed the towns of elves, gnomes, and halflings. Over a dozen settlements razed to the ground. At least 2 small armies slaughtered. Thousands dead and worse. But then he came to the human border town of Parshold. As before, he used his magic to paralyze the minds of the soldiers, as his demon army ripped them apart. He reveled in the slaughter of the humans and the burning of their homes. Finally, the last spearman fell defending the old stone tower where the children were sent in the event of invasion. Xerxes, drunk on bloodshed and high on violence, strode up to the tower door, surrounded by his cackling demon army. He could have blasted it apart, but he wanted to savor the fear of the children and elders. He banged on the door with his bone hammer, demanding entry, his minions laughing. And he was then squished flat, as a dozen steel golems leapt down from the tower roof. Even his enchanted flesh mail couldn't protect him from 12,000 pounds of steel dropped on his head. For a moment there was silence before hundreds of demons charged the guardian golems, determined to avenge their master. Day and night they fought. When a relief force of the King's Guard arrived 3 days later, they found Parshold to be a smouldering ruin. But at its centre, a single tower still stood. Only one golem remained, covered in chips and dents, missing an arm and 1 foot. His once brightly painted surface was incarnadine with demon blood and surrounded by the fallen. And when the children and elders came out to meet their rescuers, the Knight Commander, who was no less than the Grand Master of the Royal Order of the Golden Rose, got off his horse to bow his head, in thanks to the lone guardian, the final sentinel that had killed a monster in mortal flesh, and saved 142 children and 36 elders. This man, who was second only to the king in martial power, thanked this man of steel that the other races would dismiss as a possession. Eventually, Parshold was rebuilt, and many of the former children returned to their home. And with them came their golem, and 20 more made in his image. And in front of the old tower is a steel pillar. At the last golem's own insistence, his fellow guardians were melted down into a memorial. On it, you can see the names of the Steel 12. Yes, of course humans name their golems. It's still there, you know. You can go see it for yourself. You might even be able to talk to Smiling Stan, the only survivor of the Steel 12. But if you do, I warn you, do not threaten the children.